finally opened a Patreon. So if you guys want to support the channel even more, please feel free to join up on Patreon. Link in the description. And by the way, this video here was a recommendation and an idea of one of our supporters. So if you want your idea to eventually become a video, please join us on Patreon. Link in the description. Why does the South dreams of leaving Brazil behind? And the myth of the Brazilian monolith. To most of the outside world, Brazil appears as a single civilization. A vast, tropical nation with one language, one flag, and one national identity stretching from the Amazon to the Pampas. But the perception hides a deeper truth. Brazil is not a monolith. It is a continental federation, or, as some could say, an imperial project. A country stitched together from regions that developed in radically different ways. The Amazon is not the Northeast, and the Northeast is not São Paulo. And the South, my friends, the South often feels like a different country entirely. If you walk through Porto Alegre, the capital of Rio Grande do Sul, you may occasionally see a familiar sticker on the car. O Sul é meu país. Or, in English, the South is my country. For decades, this slogan has floated on the edges of Brazilian politics. A cultural curiosity, sometimes ironic, sometimes nostalgic. But every few years, especially during moments of political polarization, the idea returns to the public debate. Suddenly, it no longer sounds like a joke. It sounds like a question. Of course, as we're trying to understand this political speech here today, we do not condemn or support any type of separatism in our beloved Brazil. But it's fun and nice to understand where such speeches come from. So, why does one of Brazil's most prosperous and industrialized regions periodically flirt with the idea of leaving the country behind? Why would a state that helped build modern Brazil occasionally imagine itself as something separated from it? To understand that question, we need to look beyond modern politics, to the roots of this tension that go back nearly 2 centuries ago.
Nuestro amigo cambia sus chaps por las bombachas. Sombrero, saco, tirador y hasta se pone chiripá. Su pañuelo, ahora las botas, espuelas y el poncho.
Rio Grande do Sul, the frontier that never fully integrated. Rio Grande do Sul developed very different from the rest of Brazil. During the colonial period, much of Brazil was oriented towards the Atlantic economy, sugar plantations, slave labor, and ports connected to Portugal. But the far south was something else. It was a frontier, a vast territory of cattle ranches, open plains, and border conflicts with Spanish colonies. The culture that emerged there was deeply influenced by the Plata region, Argentina and Uruguay, rather than by the tropical centers of Brazilian power like Rio de Janeiro and Salvador. The iconic figure of the Gaúcho emerged from the frontier society. Horsemen, cattle herders, and soldiers who were deeply rooted into the land that they were born. And this frontier mentality created a political culture that often clashed with the centralized authority of the Brazilian Empire. The tension finally exploded in 1835. The Farroupilha War, Brazil's longest civil conflict. Political and economic grievances in Rio Grande do Sul erupted into an open rebellion. Local elites, ranchers, merchants, and military leaders revolted against the Brazilian Empire. What followed became the Farroupilha Revolution, also known as the Ragamuffin War. It would last for 10 years, and during that decade, the rebels did something extraordinary. The rebels established a Rio Grandense Republic, an independent state that controlled large parts of southern Brazil. For a moment in the 19th century, Brazil was not one country, it was two. The rebels minted their own currency, organized their own government, and fought imperial forces across the southern plains. Eventually, the empire managed to negotiate peace and reintegrate the region into Brazil. but the war left a permanent psychological mark on the region. Because, unlike many failed rebellions in history, the Farroupilha Revolution did not disappear from memory. It became a foundational myth. Every year, Rio Grande do Sul celebrates the Semana Farroupilha, or the Week of Farroupilha, commemorating the rebellion and the culture of the Gaúchos who fought in it. In other words, the region celebrates the moment when it almost became its own country. That memory matters, because identities built around historical rebellions tend to survive long after the war itself ends.
Quando si pianta la bella polenta si pianta così, si pianta così. Oh, bella polenta così, cha cha pon, cha cha pon, cha cha pon, cha cha pon.
The South also evolved differently from much of Brazil because of immigration. During the 19th century and early 20th century, southern Brazil received massive waves of German and Italian immigrants, and eventually Japanese immigrants. These settlers established agricultural communities, small industries, and towns that looked very differently from the plantation societies of early Brazil. Cities like Blumenau, Joinville, and Caxias do Sul still preserve visible elements of this heritage: architecture, festivals, dialects, and culinary traditions. In some rural areas, German dialects are still spoken alongside Portuguese. Over time, this created a powerful regional narrative, a belief that the South developed under a different social model, one shaped by small farmers, industrial cooperatives, and European-style civic traditions. Whether entirely accurate or not, this perception has had real political consequences in Brazil. For some southern elites, the region began to see itself not simply as part of Brazil, but as a distinct civilization within Brazil. And that perception sometimes feeds a sense of regional exceptionalism. The idea that the South is more organized, more efficient, and economically more dynamic than the federal structure governing it. Those claims are controversial and heavily debated inside of Brazil, but they form part of the ideological foundations of Southern regionalism. Now, we're gonna get into some more specific arguments here. The economic argument, the fiscal divorce. Eventually, every secession movement arrives at the same argument: economics. Supporters of Southern autonomy frequently claim that the region contributes disproportionately to Brazil's federal budget. Rio Grande do Sul, Santa Catarina, and Paraná are major contributors to Brazil's industrial output, agricultural exports, and manufacturing base. Southern agribusiness feeds global markets. Southern industries power large segments of the national economy. Yet, critics argue that the federal taxation redistributes a significant proportion of this wealth to other regions of the country. In this narrative, Brasília becomes a distant capital extracting resources while providing relatively little in return. Supporters of autonomy describe it in almost marital terms: a fiscal divorce. Why remain tied to a system that allegedly drains the region's economical potential? For the business elites, the frustration often centers around bureaucracy, regulatory obstacles, tax complexity, and federal policies that they believe slow economical growth. For some grassroots activists, the conclusion becomes more radical. If reform is impossible, independence becomes the ultimate solution. A small, highly developed southern state integrated into the global markets could theoretically resemble Uruguay or even parts of Europe. At least, that is the dream. Reality, however, is more complicated. The goddamn Constitution. The constitutional wall. Brazil's political system is not designed to allow succession. The Brazilian constitution defines that the federation is unbreakable. There is no legal mechanism that allows a state to leave the country. Any attempt at independence would immediately trigger a constitutional crisis, and almost certainly provoke a confrontation with the federal government. But that would never happen, you know. We only had like, what, 1, 2 constitutions before? We would never change the constitution, guys. That would never happen again. Don't worry about it. The constitution will never change. I'm sorry. Even beyond legal barriers, the economical realities make succession extremely difficult. Southern Brazil is deeply integrated into the national economy. Its industries depend on supply chains that cross state borders. Its markets depend heavily on Brazilian consumers. Breaking it away would not simply create a new border, it would fracture an entire economical system. And there is also the geopolitical question, of course. If Rio Grande do Sul or the southern region managed to succeed successfully, it could trigger a domino effect across Brazil. Other regions with strong identities might begin to ask similar questions. The Amazon, the Northeast, and even São Paulo. A successful succession could transform Brazil from a continental federation into a fragmented political landscape, which is precisely why the federal government would likely resist such a scenario at all costs. So, succession or signal? My friends, if you ask me right now, is Southern independence actually a serious political project? Probably not. At least, not in the immediate future. But the persistence of the ideas tell us something important about how the Brazilian Federation works, and where some of its tensions lie. One of the biggest sources of frustration in the South revolves around Brazil's tax redistribution system. Brazil operates under a highly centralized fiscal model. Most major taxes, including income taxes and several industrial and consumption taxes, are collected under federal authority. States and municipalities also collect their own taxes, but a large portion of the national revenue flows through Brasilia before being redistributed back to the states. The logic behind the system is political and historical. Brazil is an extremely unequal country, and the federal government redistributes resources to help fund infrastructure, social programs, and public services in the poorest regions of the country. But that redistribution has long been controversial in the wealthier states. In the South, and especially in industrial states like São Paulo or Paraná, critics argue that the system effectively transfers a large portion of locally generated wealth to the federal government. The numbers often cited by regional activists are stark. For example, if a state like São Paulo collects the equivalent of 100 reais in federal taxes, a significant portion of that money goes back to Brasilia. The redistribution through federal spendings and transfers, the state may receive only a fraction of that amount back. In some estimates, often circulated in political debates, wealthier regions help support national development, reduce inequality, and stabilize the federation. Meanwhile, poorer regions of the country receive far large transfers in federal spending, infrastructure, and investment and social programs. To supporters of the system, this redistribution is simply the cost of maintaining a unified country. States in the South and the Southeast might see something closer to 13 to 15 reais returned for every 100 collected. But, to critics in the South, the arrangements sometimes feel less like solidarity and more like extraction. The perception, fair or not, is that the productive regions are financing a federal system that is inefficient, bureaucratic, and politically distant. And that perception feeds directly into the rhetoric of movements like O Sul é meu país. They are talking about the structure of the Brazilian state itself. In that sense, the separatist slogan is not necessarily a literal blueprint for independence. It is something closer to a political pressure valve, a way of expressing dissatisfaction with how the Federation distributes power, resource, and economical opportunity. Because when people in the South talk about leaving Brazil, they're often not just talking about geographically. And whenever a country as vast and unequal as Brazil can continue to function under a system that regions increasingly feel no longer works in their favor, it's something that only time will tell. And thank you so much for watching this video till the end. Sorry, we're just starting with this new type of content right now, so please feel free to comment down below. So please feel free to comment down below. What do you like from the video? Which next topics you want to see? Is there something we should change? Is the music loud? Is the music low? We are really gonna put a lot of effort into this next projects throughout the next few months. So, if you've arrived in the end and you want to support the channel, please, now we not only have a Patreon, but a Pix for the Brazilian viewers. So guys, if you want to support the channel with amazing rewards, please subscribe on Patreon, and some of those rewards will translate to Pix. Thank you so much for all the support that we've been having, and please, believe us, this next year, it's gonna be amazing. Thank you very much. We have a lot of projects in the oven right now. Thank you. I'm Johnny, and we're from the Hemisphere. Thank you very much.